the most curious ironies of life is that sometimes being stupid is the intelligent play. And this scenario happens continuously from year dot to today, and throughout your entire life. There'll be lots of moments where being stupid, intentionally stupid, is preferable to being intelligent. There's many examples of how this works. It's strange because as a species, we put a lot of emphasis on intelligence, in that we hope that the people who lead us are intelligent. We hope that people that operate the doomsday machine are intelligent. We hope the weatherman's intelligent. We hope the people that make our movies are intelligent. We hope the train driver's got some kind of intelligence, because if they haven't, it's very worrying, isn't it? So as a society, we put a lot of emphasis on intelligence as being a very important part of life. And generally speaking, we're often very dismissive of stupidity. And yet, at this very moment, there's probably something in this world that you're being deliberately stupid about. Because side by side to the need for intelligence, societies function on stupidity. Another way to describe stupidity is just sort of the movement of the mob. It can be anything. If society at large, for some reason, either by a top-down pressure or from a bottom-up pressure or just by natural evolution of ideas or whatever, if society gets it into its head that the best way to proceed with a situation is, probably quite a stupid way to proceed, then everybody has to go along with it. For ease of communication, we always come back to the old internet meme, everything comes back to the Nazis at some point. And it's always used as the example, isn't it? When you're like a German citizen at the time of the Nazis, when they just got into power and getting rid of everybody, all their opposition, to what extent do you try and apply a bit of intelligence to the scenario? After the war and everything, they're like, why didn't the German people go against Mr. Hitler or whatever? And it's because, in the social paranoia of a situation, it's not in your self-interest to stick your head above the parapet when things that are going on probably have nothing to do with you, but you can see that that's not intelligent, if you know what I mean. And in order to preserve your own life and your own well-being, you just sort of play stupid, as it were. It's very easy for society to then even hate people that play stupid and don't say anything. When the mob rule gets so intense, as it were, that if you're there standing in a room with like 30 people and they're all doing the Sieg Heils and all that kind of thing, if you just stand there not Sieg Heiling going, it's a bit dumb, isn't it? Come on, why? It's like, they're all going to turn their faces on you like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, aren't they? And it's going to be like, you're in the dumpster now, mate. And they're going to be looking for the next opportunity to fling you in jail or chop your head off or whatever it is that they did to non-believers in that particular environment. And so that's always the difficult thing, in that playing stupid when you're in a mob scenario, and it's like, it's a bit of a cop out going for the Nazis. How does that help me in learning, about today's, what would be today's examples of mob rules? And there are lots of examples. It's basically the equivalent of like when you're at school and two of your mates start fighting. You know, you're not fighting; they're fighting. You know, for whatever reason, and maybe they both fancy the same girl, and it's finally come to a head, and you know they're bashing antlers. You know, and you're standing there, and you know it's a bit dumb. You know this isn't what's supposed to be going on. But you're friends with both of them. You don't want to interrupt that fella. You don't want to interrupt that fella and be on one particular side. You know, if you rush in, sort of like help that one beat up that one, then you've lost that friendship, haven't you? But if you rush in and help beat up the other fella, then it doesn't work, does it? So you have the eternal philosophical option of what do you do? Do you just stand there and let them fight to the finish? Perfectly reasonable, that's possibly understandable, but then you could still lose one of your friends because they could go really into it. You know, they could get down to the sitting on top of each other and bashing heads state, which you don't want. You don't want it to get that far. But you don't want to intervene, and like they're so at it and you know heads locked that if you like go in to try and separate them, even you know you could just get a few punches in your face because they're so into going at it, and it's not necessarily going to help. And you know then when they finish fighting, you've got that whole cold sort of like aftermath where you don't really know which friend you're going to, you know, when he talks to you, one of them talks to you, he's like, you know, you're going to say my friend, he's a twat, isn't he? And do you agree with him that the other fella's a twat? And then the other one's going to be coming to you and he says, wasn't that other guy being a twat? Don't you agree? And it's like you're put in a spot, aren't you? And it's like, and intelligence, the only intelligent thing to do is to be stupid and just go, yeah. Because there's nothing you can do. It's like this nil scenario. You can't berate them both for being silly, really. Maybe they'll both stop liking you. Maybe then they'll team up and say, why were we friends with that guy anyway? He doesn't seem to be very loyal, does he? You know. And you know, we can see this all around us, sort of like, you know, the trans debate, when that particular cancel culture got to its peak. And, you know, it's like people like sharing their opinion online, and if you said the wrong one, that mob hated you and cancelled you. Or if the other team, you know, if you said something that they didn't like, then they'd immediately cancel you as well. And in order to have a vocal space on the cutting edge of the current debate, you know, to get yourself to the top of the algorithm, or the most people watching your channel, whether you're mainstream media or tiny little fish or whatever, then how can you provide what you consider to be an intelligent opinion, put in your 2 cents worth for the progress of humanity, when these two gangs, as it were, are only giving you 2 options? And if you stay silent, they're both suspicious of you. If you try to separate them with some kind of medium, you're probably going to get beaten up by both, because each side has got these very specific agendas that, they're unmovable. And you can see from the outset that they're both a form of extremity, and probably the answer lies somewhere in between. And you know, for like with the trans or whatever, and I've met loads of trans people through my life, and trans people are just like any other people. If you get a room full of 30 of them, you're probably going to get a spectrum of opinion and a spectrum of why they're trans, and a spectrum of what age they thought they were trans, and a spectrum of what they think trans people, the extent to which trans people should be treated as a woman as opposed to a trans, as opposed to a man. And you know, you have all the different categories, all the way from like the cross-dresser all the way to the person who's pretty much a spitting image of a woman. This is all the male ones, of course. There's a lot of female to male trans as well, but I can only really, from my point of view, speak about the male to female trans, or variations thereof within that community that I've experienced, because I haven't actually met that many female to males and all that spectrum. I don't know why that is. Weirdly enough, when I used to go out on the town, as it were, I'm a bit of a butterfly. I move around, you know, I go to the hetero pubs and the gay pubs and all that kind of thing. I do the whole circuit. I like to have a bit of fun when I'm out, and the problem with hetero pubs is, you know, it's a very very aggressive atmosphere, and hetero clubs as well, and they're not really dancing focused. But the great thing about going to a gay bar is that, you know, dancing was sort of like, yeah, and a much nicer atmosphere for dancing. I mean, and you know, who I had sex with was never something that particularly bothered me, because as I probably said in other videos, I'm not a very highly sexually motivated person anyway. I tend to operate on a who's interested in me category and taking it from there, rather than you know, going out and hunting. You know, unless it has to be somebody very specific for me to like take an interest. So specific that it happens very rarely, and they usually say no. So, you know, and anyway, so I met a lot of male to female trans in that department, because they would have all gone to these gay bars as well. But never a great friends with any. I'm not going to say that, oh, 3 of my best friends are trans or whatever. So I can't speak from that point of view. But none of that makes any difference. You know, my life experience and my communications with people doesn't make any difference, because there's 2 agendas. You know, either you're sort of like trans male to female are blokes, or trans male to female are women, in the grand scheme of things. And it's like, you know, again, it's the same situation. It's like, stop fighting, please. That's not the intelligent way to go about this. You know, there's got to be some kind of medium here, but no, there isn't, because, you know, they're all stagged up. You know, they're locked. You know, if you say, as soon as you say something like, you know, well, I don't know, I think J.K. Rowling does make some interesting points. Oh my God, no! Oh God, cancelled. Gone. You know, 3,000 React videos. Look at this nutter. Yeah, what's he doing there? You know, look at his crap choice of curtains. Isn't he a retard? Freeze frame, funny facial expression, meme created, blah blah blah. And you know, it's like, you know, next thing the police are at the door. You know, have you been spreading hate speech? You know, I was like, I don't know. I honestly don't know. What do you mean? You know, you said, you know, you said you thought J.K. Rowling has some good ideas. It's like, did I probably, I think she does. You know, and you know, then the next thing you know, so you know, sort of like, they managed to find somebody in your past and given her like 3,000 quid to just say he raped you. It's like, oh my God, this is getting really intense now. This is war, isn't it? And from the other side are doing the same thing the other way, and it's all hairy. And you can't have an opinion on it. You can't really state what your opinion is, because your opinion is irrelevant, no matter how intelligent you think it is, even if it's not intelligent. But even if you're trying to add some kind of thought to this thoughtless process, it's a shame how things work, and the fact that these situations like this is what always crushes intelligence. Freedom of expression or whatever. Freedom of expression of ideas. And it's an interesting dichotomy that sometimes just being stupid is probably a huge asset. When you go on YouTube to watch something, you don't really want to watch somebody who's intelligent. The stats don't work out that way. First of all, you can't make regular content and have it be super intelligent all the time. If you want to drum out videos every day and get hundreds of thousands, maybe even 1 million views every day, you know where I'm going with this, don't you? You know the person I'm going to mention, don't you? And you've just got to be exciting in your reactions, as it were. You've just got to be highly animated in your reactions and be a bit dumb and react to everything like a stupid person would. Have you guessed yet? I'm talking about PewDiePie, aren't I? Because watching PewDiePie is wonderful, isn't it? And you can see why it's popular. You stick on a horror. He's playing a horror game, and he's like getting really and emoting to the effects, and doing all the wrong moves and making mistakes, and you're laughing at him, but you're also laughing with him. He's got that magic, and it's all perfect, isn't it? And that's entertainment. But of course, there's no intelligence there. It's, if anything, trying to communicate intelligence as a form of entertainment, it's the opposite. And again, you can go back to the school analogy. And when you're at school, the kids that are the smartest often have a personality flaw where they don't really get on with other people, and they often find themselves getting bullied. Not all the smart ones, there's a lot of smart people that are lucky enough to have they're big, they've got a deep voice, or they happen to have the gift of the gab or whatever. But very often there's going to be the smart ones who are getting bullied the most. And the smart ones who can't really relate to everybody else. It's just really awkward how that works in society, in that we have this great need for intelligence for our own survivability, but at the same time we intentionally persecute intelligence, particularly extreme awkward intelligence. And I don't know if I have any answers for this. I suppose it's just something I wanted to vent, really, because at the moment, of course, a lot of controversy at the moment is building up between Iran and Israel, and Palestine and Israel. A bit like Ukraine and Russia, it's like the old proxy wars from the Cold War. As a human species, we've got to try and prevent these wars from escalating to where the bombs start, the big bombs start flying around, just like we did in the old days during the Cold War. But at the same time, from our own intelligence, and desire to not have our heads chopped off, as it were, we want to try and go with the line that our mob is most likely going to be, you know, the main propaganda stream of our mob, as it were, because we don't want to be ostracised from our mob. It's very difficult, isn't it? You can see the antlers are coming together between people that have very strong opinions about this intractable situation where two of your friends are fighting, and you know they've both done bad things, and they're both good, but they've both done good things, and they're arguing about who's worse and who's better, and we can't like try and separate them, because like if we try and separate them, they're going to punch us, aren't they? You know. This kind of global warfare version is a lot different to the social version of the trans issue. With the social version of the trans issue, at the end of it, you haven't got a potential of nuclear war. You've just got the potential of sort of not really knowing what to say in public, possibly having some friends not speak to you anymore. That's a bit different to nuclear war, isn't it? And so, yeah, we're stuck in this situation where we just want to say, look, can you please calm down a bit? Can we? Are we done yet? Have we had enough bloodshed for us to recalibrate the situation and maybe come down to, you know, has everybody got what they want yet? No, they haven't. I'm supposed to have an opinion on whether I would be supportive of Israel or Palestine. You know, it's like the intelligent thing, the intelligence in my head that's saying you can't contribute to this. You have nothing to give. There's something going on that's beyond your control. You can't pick a who's right and who's wrong necessarily, just like that. There's so much nuance that, you know, it would drive you mad trying to figure out all the nuances to come to some kind of intelligent, sensible opinion on how to resolve the situation, or what your opinion should be. That you just have, you know, you just play stupid. It's like, what's your opinion on this? On what? As a species, how can we get to a point where we have the correct amount of intelligence? Where as a society we're not overly intelligent, where we're making sort of like bizarre, inhumane decisions based on rationality of, I don't know, cream cakes are bad for you, so we're going to ban cream. You know, if you ate too many cream cakes, they're bad for you. And I don't know, if if you ate 4,000 cream cakes a day, they give you diabetes or whatever it is. So therefore, we're going to ban cream cakes. You know, we don't really want that kind of intelligence. That's a bit over the top. You know what I mean? But at the same time, we don't want to be at the stupidity level where, you know, we want our kids go to school and at the canteen stall it's just all cream cakes and they're all like this at lunchtime and they're getting fatter and fatter and fatter. You know, we don't want to be that. We want to be somewhere in between. Not in between, but sort of like, you know, too intelligent right there. It's like, and so, it's so difficult because the mob keeps sucking the intelligence down by the nature of conflict, and the over-intelligent sort of like aspects of society, the people who run things, they just become so detached and so pessimistic about the nature of the lack of intelligence down below that they go, that's what, you know, they go insane with their power or whatever. And it's sort of like they start imagining themselves as gods because they're just so intelligent and detached and all that. You know, it's just awkward, really. And I I genuinely think for the future of humanity, that's the kind of areas where we should be looking at in the on the concepts of the human nature. It's going to be looking at that kind of thing that prevents the nuclear bombs going off at some point. That's in the old days we could just have a big war. You could lots of people run onto a battlefield with spears and prong each other for a few days, and that's it. Everybody can calm down again a bit after that. We know who the boss is after that, and everybody's released all their tension, haven't they? And you know, lots of heads have rolled, and but it's all like in 3 days, and you know they can sing about it for years, and you know, poems and books and songs and memories and all that wonderful battle we had, you know, 40 years ago. You know, that'll keep them going for a bit, and that tended to be how we resolved these kinds of situations in the past. But as the 20th century grew on, it became evident that that's no longer how we can solve our problems. And I just, you know, wanted to remind that's what happened in the Cold War. That's why we had a Cold War and not a proper war, because there was an understanding that we can't have proper wars anymore. We're going to try and have to figure out a society that works without the antler bashing. Yeah, whether that works out, whether we've forgotten about that because the Cold War ended, I don't know. We shall wait and see, I suppose. Can we, you know, can we get back to a sort of scenario where people have some means of entering into these supposed warfare issues that, you know, doesn't involve it being warfare? Does that make sense? Can we have warfare without warfare? I don't know. We'll wait and see, really, won't we?